The first documented use of the conspiracy theory term is found in an American Historical Review article published in 1909, but it wasn't until the 1960s that the conspiracy theory phrase acquired its negative connotations and became commonly used as a derogatory, pejorative slur. Conspiracy theory's negative associations can be traced back to political scientist Richard Hofstadter's 1964 article in Harper's Magazine, where he suggested conspiracy theories stem from the paranoid style in American politics. However, it was the CIA who ultimately weaponized the term when it was adopted as the fundamental component in their propaganda campaign to oppose conspiracy theories. In 1967, the CIA essentially weaponized the conspiracy theory term and engaged in information warfare when it sent a detailed memo to all of its bureaus titled Countering Criticisms of the Warren Commission Report, which was the government's official investigation into the JFK assassination. The memo begins with the CIA expressing their concerns, stating that from the day of President Kennedy's assassination on, there has been speculation about the responsibility for his murder in a new wave of books and articles criticizing the commission's findings. Critics speculating as to the existence of some kind of conspiracy, implying the Warren Commission was involved, and that Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson himself benefited and was in some way responsible for the assassination. Conspiracy theories have frequently thrown suspicion on our own organization because we were directly involved and contributed to the investigation. This trend of opinion is a matter of concern to the US government and our organization because it affects the whole reputation of the American government and casts doubt on the leadership of American society. Despite being marked "Destroy when no longer needed," the dispatch was released 9 years later in response to a New York Times Freedom of Information Act request and is available online. The memo was marked Psych, short for Psychological Operations, or PSYOP, and CS, short for Clandestine Services. The memo outlines a detailed series of actions and techniques to counter and discredit the claims of conspiracy theorists. Its directives include instructing agents to, quote, employ propaganda assets to refute the attacks of the critics, adding, book reviews and feature articles are particularly appropriate for this purpose, advising covert assets in the media to ignore conspiracy claims unless discussion is already taking place, and directing agents to remind their friendly elite contacts, especially politicians and editors, of the Warren Commission's integrity and urge them to use their influence to discourage unfounded and irresponsible speculation. CIA document 1035-960 further outlines additional talking points to counter conspiratorial arguments, stating, the following arguments should be useful. Claim the charges of the critics are without serious foundation and based on unreliable eyewitness testimony. Claim that it would be impossible to conceal such a large-scale conspiracy.
I don't believe in conspiracies because nobody keeps anything secret. Nobody keeps anything secret.
That is the best defense against conspiracy theories.
The biggest problem with conspiracies, particularly government conspiracies, is government bureaucrats are not very competent and they can't keep their mouth shut. People can't keep their mouth shut. As you know, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. There is no conspiracy because people can't keep their mouth shut.
Can you actually imagine that our government was capable and then keeping it off of the front page of the New York Times? No.
It would be a conspiracy of thousands of people all over the world. Wouldn't it leak? Wouldn't some of those people be eager to talk about it? Wouldn't we in the media love to put it on the front page? Wouldn't it be a big headline? Don't you think that the fact that it's not on the front page means it's probably not true? And they look at me and they just don't believe. I don't convince them.
If something like this was going on, I promise you, someone would be blowing the whistle.
Many times you hear, well, someone would have talked. Many people have talked. It's simply mainstream media won't report that they did.
Claim that further speculative discussion only plays into the hands of the opposition.
Billionaire businessman Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks basketball team, is putting up money to distribute a 9/11 conspiracy film, and it's awful, you know that. The film is going to be used by American haters all over the world, and decent people should be outraged. It's not a free speech argument. It's basically you give the enemies of America all over the world who play to uninformed bigotry, you give them another tool in which to hurt America.
What bothers me more is the jihadists and those in the other parts of the world are going to use it and also point to Mark Cuban and say, look and see what happened. The Americans did it themselves. We're innocent. We didn't do anything. Blame the Jews. Blame America.
We're in a war here, Mike. You got to understand it, that if it was peacetime and this was just kooky people I probably wouldn't pay attention to it. But they're going to take this, all right, and they're going to translate it into Arabic, and they're going to run it out.
He has free speech, but I got to tell you something. This will be used by America's enemies as propaganda.
And they shove this stuff down the throat of these people who have no frame of reference, live in countries where there's no free press, Mike. This is dangerous propaganda. It would not have happened in World War II. You will import this movie, Mike. This is going to get Americans killed.
No, it's not.
If Mark Cuban had done this in World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt would have thrown his butt in jail.
People who support that also are giving aid and comfort to the enemy who wants to kill
stop with the aid and comfort to the enemy.
Claim that, quote, no significant new evidence has emerged.
It's the same old stuff, the same old points, nothing new.
If you've got evidence, show us, but there's been no new evidence in 8 years. Go away. Sorry.
Accuse theorists of falling in love with their theories.
They are too ideologically and, I think, emotionally satisfying to the people who espouse them.
Claim conspiracy theorists are wedded to their theories before the evidence was in.
Conspiracy theories work backwards. An event happens, and you look at the event and say, well, wait a minute, could it be bigger than that? And if you're asking questions, actually asking questions to find out answers, you can find a real conspiracy. Conspiracy theorists take those facts and unwind them on the basis of an original belief. What you end up with is not, well, here is my evidence that leads me to these conclusions. It's, let me tear down the official story.
Accuse theorists of being politically motivated.
The far left fringe has embraced the conspiracy theory that elements of the U.S. government carried out the attacks on 9/11. It's unbelievable, but that's what they're saying. Why is the far left putting military and all Americans in danger?
The left's going to go nuts over it like they did with Michael Moore.
All right, Mr. Liberal, why don't you get to your point instead of being a little snotty, left-wing radical. Go ahead.
This is also not a left-right issue.
Let's sit down and talk.
Alex Jones is behind this movie is a right-winger, by the way. It's not left-right.
You're trying to create a partisan wedge to keep people in the partisan left-right paradigm.
Accuse theorists of being financially motivated.
I get that the guys who sell this stuff for a living have a reason to sell this stuff. There's always going to be a very, very, very exciting market for these things. There is money to be made in feeding the ragged edge of America's long-standing conspiratorial mindset. And, I'm sure it's good for business. These guys have a good racket going. It's always the end of the world, but not quite yet. Subscribe for one more month, because then it'll be the end of the world. Only $19.95, and yes, you can pay in gold.
The government and media continue to rely on the conspiracy theory pejorative label, paired with the psyop tactics found in this memo, to dismiss conspiracy allegations to this day. The CIA's strategy to make conspiracy belief a target of ridicule and hostility is arguably the most successful propaganda campaign in modern history. The government's network of covert propaganda assets and friendly elite contacts referenced in this document were partially brought to light in a 1975 congressional investigation into government agencies' intelligence activities. The hearings, known as the Church Committee, were investigating the intelligence activities of the CIA, NSA, and FBI after illegal surveillance activities surfaced during the Watergate scandal.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to two American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
The investigation revealed that the CIA was paying bribe money equivalent to $1 billion adjusted for inflation under the table to heads of major media companies, editors, and reporters to act as gatekeepers and propagandists for the establishment. The Commission's final report determined that, quote, the CIA currently maintains a network of several hundred foreign individuals around the world who provide intelligence for the CIA and at Times attempt to influence opinion through the use of covert propaganda. These individuals provide the CIA with direct access to a large number of newspapers, periodicals, scores of press services and news agencies, radio and television stations, commercial book publishers, and other foreign media outlets. In 1977, Pulitzer Prize winner Carl Bernstein shined further light on the CIA's propaganda network in his Rolling Stone article titled "The CIA and the Media." The article exposes how America's most powerful news media worked hand in glove with the CIA and that the Church Committee actually played a part in covering it up. After leaving the Washington Post, where he uncovered the Watergate scandal with partner Bob Woodward, Carl Bernstein spent 6 months investigating the relationship between the CIA and the media. His findings revealed that for the last 25 years, the CIA built a network of over 400 covert propaganda paid operatives, secretly spread throughout influential positions in the mainstream media, including the Associated Press, Reuters, UPI, ABC, NBC, Newsweek, and the largest newspaper and magazine publisher, Hearst, adding, quote, "By far the most valuable of these associations, according to CIA officials, have been with the New York Times, CBS, and Time Incorporated."
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, the ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
This groundbreaking expose of government involvement in the media also accused the Church Committee investigation of being a whitewash, stating that CIA Director George Bush persuaded the committee to limit its inquiry and misrepresent the actual scope of the CIA's activities in the final report, adding, "It makes no mention of the actual number of journalists who undertook covert tasks for the CIA, nor does it adequately describe the role played by newspaper and broadcast executives who are cooperating with the agency." Bernstein concludes by stating the obvious, writing, "The CIA's use of the American news media has been much more extensive than agency officials have acknowledged publicly or in closed sessions with members of Congress. The CIA's secret propaganda campaign to manipulate the media came to be known as Operation Mockingbird."
Operation Mockingbird, you know, this was a program that the CIA, FBI was inserting operatives within all the major media networks. I mean, we're talking about all of them. Yeah. Papers, publications. My whole question is this still going on today? Because they've really permeated throughout the culture of the establishment media. And really, we see the establishment media today, they just parrot the establishment. I'm like, wait, has this gone full circle?
You say that continues today? Well, yeah, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations of the period of the 1970s, it seems to me that a reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
Mr. President, earlier this year you told us you had ordered your administration to cease and desist on payments to journalists to promote your agenda. You cited the need for ethical concerns and the need for a bright line between the press and the government. Your administration continues to make the use of video news releases, which are prepackaged news stories sent to television stations, fully aware that some or many of these stations will air them without any disclaimer that they are produced by the government. Does it raise ethical questions about the use of government money to produce stories about the government that wind up being aired with no disclosure that they were produced by the government?
There is a Justice Department opinion that says these pieces are within the law so long as they're based upon facts, not advocacy. It's been a long-standing practice of the federal government to use these types of videos. I think it'd be helpful if local stations then disclose to their viewers if that's, that this was based upon a factual report and they chose to use it. But evidently in some cases that's not the case. So anyway.
To guarantee that's happening by including that language in the prepackaged report.
Yeah, I don't, look, oh, you mean a disclosure? I'm George W. Bush and I...
Well, some way to make sure it couldn't air without the disclosure that you believe is so vital.
Ken, I mean, there's a procedure that we're going to follow, and the local stations ought to, if there's a deep concern about that, ought to tell their viewers what they're watching.
You ask, is this still going on today? Well, we can look at the last National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA 2013, has a provision in there that legalizes propaganda.
Propaganda. The
programmed by governments to manipulate people's thoughts and opinions. Right now, the use of propaganda by the U.S. government is only allowed when it's used in other countries. The Pentagon actually spends about $4 billion a year to sway public opinion in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Evidence that it can be a lucrative weapon when fighting a war, especially when part of that war is an information war. Well, now the U.S. government wants to be able to use propaganda on its own people. This provision is buried deep within the $642 billion defense bill and would give the government overarching power to push television, radio, print, and social media onto the U.S. public.
The U.S. is losing an information war to alternative media outlets. That's the message from Hillary Clinton to Congress members. The U.S. Secretary of State says Washington needs to step up its propaganda efforts.
We are in an information war, and we are losing that war. I'll be very blunt in my assessment.
War declared. The U.S. is now officially in an information battle with foreign media, which provide alternative views on world news. Views which often run in contrast to the coverage of events by the U.S. mainstream media.
She basically said the U.S. should step up propaganda efforts and get back, quote, in the game of doing, quote, what we do best. Here is more.
During the Cold War, we did a great job in getting America's message out. After the Berlin Wall fell, we said, okay, fine, enough of that. You know, we've done it, we're done. And unfortunately, we are paying a big price for it. And our private media cannot fill that gap. In fact, our private media, particularly cultural programming, often works at counter purposes to what we truly are as Americans and what our values are.
Clearly, the United States feels on the defensive, in part because it can no longer monopolize not only the terms of, authority in these countries, but also the terms of the debate. There's other information out there. There are other points of view. And those points of view are profoundly damaging to a country that believes that its point of view is the only point of view, or should be the only point of view.
The First Lady of the United States recently addressed concerns about internet during a cyberspatial Millennium Project press conference just weeks after Lewinsky broke. She said, we're all going to have to rethink how we deal with the internet. As exciting as these new developments are, there are a number of serious issues without any kind of editing function or gatekeeping function.
She said, what the problem with the internet was just getting started back in those days, is that there are no gatekeepers. Think about that. There are no gatekeepers. She wants gatekeepers on the free flow of information.
1995 was also on a 93 memo. Clinton administration feared internet's ability to democratize news. It says, the new media is here. We've got to control info. We can't let the public have access. These are quotes. To free information.
Now with a modem, anyone can follow the world and report on the world. No middleman, no big brother. And I guess this changes everything. But I'm excited about the launch of this internet medium, and again, freedom of the press belongs to anyone who owns one.
This attack on free speech is happening because the old dinosaur media, the state-run media, is in free fall. You have a perfect storm of state-run media and government wanting to control information.
If you look at where a lot of the work originates, where the first things come out on the internet, some of them tend to be these political fringe sites, and yet they're treated by much of the media as if they're somehow credible, that a quote from one of those sites is no different than something from the New York Times.
We've got to have the media call anyone that questions us conspiracy theorists, and any media that's not the Washington Post or New York Times is a conspiracy theory. They want to set the Overton window. They want to set the parameters of debate where only what MSNBC says or CNN says with White House talking points is the acceptable political discussion.
They knew what the internet meant for them.
And they were conspiring like the Soviet Union to kill it in its crib.
The great story here for anybody willing to find it and write about it and explain it is this vast right-wing conspiracy that has been conspiring against my husband since the day he announced for president.
This is not our opinion or a conspiracy theory like Hillary puts in your mind, just a denial button people can push. They release us on the Clinton official presidential library website.
Despite the media and government's outright condemnation of conspiracy theories, the public is becoming increasingly skeptical of the government and the mainstream media.
It's hardly breaking news that the public has soured on the media, but the latest figures are truly sobering. 80% of Americans believe TV and newspaper reporters are dishonest and unethical, according to a Gallup poll. 80%, putting them barely ahead of car salesmen and members of Congress.
Faith in American institutions is at an all-time low. We've told you this for years now.
According to a new Gallup poll, American distrust of the news media reached an all-time high this year.
The establishment openly admits they fear the alternative information provided by independent news online because it threatens the corporate media's monopoly over information. The public's ability to network, organize, and share information online, bypassing the mainstream media traditional information gatekeepers, putting the establishment's house of cards in jeopardy.
In recent decades, worldwide social change has experienced unprecedented historical acceleration, particularly because instant mass communications, such as radio, television, and the internet, cumulatively have been stimulating a universal awakening of mass political consciousness. The resulting widespread rise in worldwide populist activism is proving inimical to external domination of the kind that prevailed in the age of colonialism and imperialism. Persistent and highly motivated populist resistance of politically awakened and historically resentful peoples to external control has proven to be increasingly difficult to suppress.
In earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people, literally. It was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. It is easier to kill than to control.